What is up, Packers fans? Andy Herman here. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. We are doing our gut reactions to the Packers selection of Savion Williams and, of course, Anthony Belton taken on day 2 of the draft. Today's show is presented by Luiges Pizza. If you are maybe trying to cope with the picks that were taken, make sure to get yourself a Luiges Pizza. They'll help you with that. I would go, if you're coping, I would probably go with the ultra thin crust. Actually, no, I would go with probably the fresh dough pizza if I'm coping. And then if I'm celebrating, I'm going to go with the ultra thin crust is probably what I'm looking for right now. Either way, Luiges Pizza's got you covered. They have a ton of different varieties, breakfast pizzas. They have dinner pizzas as well, lunch pizzas, snack pizzas, whatever you want. All of your favorite toppings, make sure to check them out. Luiges Frozen Pizzas, you can find them at Festival Foods, Woodman's Foods, and a lot of other places. So make sure to get yourself some Luiges Pizza. Also, listen, big hits belong on the field, right? Not in real life. If you've been injured, call Habish or Rotier. Anytime that you are looking for a personal injury attorney, that is when you're going to want to go to Habish. You can find them at habish.com. You can also find them 1-800-2HABISH. That's 1-800-242-2874. My favorite thing about calling up Habish is that you're going to talk to a lawyer directly. You're not going to talk to a random customer service agent, have to hit a bunch of buttons. You're going to be able to talk to that lawyer directly when you call them again, 800-2HABISH, or find them over at habish.com. A huge thank you to both Luiges Pizza and Habish and Rotier for sponsoring our draft content all weekend long. As I mentioned, this is our gut reaction video to the 2 selections on day 2 of the draft. I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm flying fully off the cuff here. I have no notes that I want to go over today. I didn't put down all my little scouting report notes for both Savion Williams and Anthony Belton. I have both of them. We're going to go over them tomorrow in tomorrow's show as we do kind of our deeper breakdown of day 2 and we start looking forward to day 3 of the draft. Of course, later in the week, we will do our deep dive episodes breaking down these prospects in their entirety. Every little nuance you're going to want to know about them, that's going to go through as I watch perilous amounts of tape over the course of the next couple weeks on these players. So look forward to that as well. But right now, this is just my immediate gut reaction. I know some of you always say that I only have positives to say and I can spin it in any direction. You're darn right. No, I do have a lot of positives to say. I actually probably feel a little bit better about this than I think probably most people do. But I do think there are some question marks and some concerns. The first thing I will say is this feels like, as of right now, we don't know what's going to happen on Saturday. We have a full 4 rounds left in this draft, but we do not know what players they're potentially going to take or how they're going to attack defensive end, defensive tackle, whatever corner moving forward. But as of right now, this feels like a very unbalanced draft, to say the least. When I asked how people are feeling, a lot of people simply replied confused. Maybe like the players, but are confused by the positions, or maybe are fine with the positions, but are confused by the players. Some people maybe don't like either. Some people probably like both. But why? How does this draft in particular make sense? One thing that I think is worth noting is you don't get to choose. You don't get to choose how the draft board is going to fall to you. I would be willing to bet you that Goody had a lot of different scenarios that included defensive ends, defensive tackles, cornerbacks, and a lot of defense. I bet if you asked Goody going into the draft, if he would have 3 defensive players or 3 offensive players by the end of day 2, I bet he would have bet you that he ended up with 3 defensive players. But sometimes that's just not how the draft falls to you, and you have to adjust accordingly. And when Goody said that he was going to go into this draft believing that he had everything he needed at his positions, that he needed them at, that he could go into a game tomorrow and play it, that they didn't feel like they needed to do anything. Whether you think that's the right assessment or not, I believe him that he believed it. I believe that he went into this draft feeling that they did not have any real specific needs that they had to address. And I think we sort of saw that loud and clear. Now, they probably wanted some speed at wide receiver, some deep ball ability. They've got 2 guys now that can potentially do that in Savion Williams and Golden. Now, Savion Williams did not make a habit of that in college. In fact, I think he only had 1 catch this past year over 20 yards, if I remember reading one of those scouting reports correctly. But that was not something he made a huge habit of. But, certainly Matthew Golden could do that. So I think they probably wanted to do some of that. But I legitimately believe that he felt he could go in and they could win any football games that they wanted to with the roster that they already had. And they went into this draft as they always will from now until the end of the Gutekunst era, and probably well beyond that, because it's probably going to be a Ron Wolf, Ted Thompson, Brian Gutekunst disciple, whoever takes over for him. You are probably going to continue to look at taking best player available, who's on their board, and stacking their board based on value and future needs, not just current needs, which in general is the best way that you can go about it. But a lot of times it can leave a lot of frustration. And in this particular draft, it leaves a lot of question marks, certainly some confusion, and a very unbalanced draft. Let's look at this from a defensive side of things first. There has to be, I think, even probably within the organization, some level of disappointment that they have not been able to address defense in any real way. Let me address this thing very clearly because I've already seen it. No, I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that this changes the calculus with Jair Alexander. I do think that he is still unequivocally gone. I think it is 99.9% chance that he is out the door, and I do not think this changes things. But if that does remain the case, you are still relatively thin at corner. Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and then obviously Nate Hobbs are your only kind of reliable corners on this roster. You have Bullard to play in the slot, and then it gets to Kamal Haddon and Kalen King very quickly. That's not where you want to get very quickly, regardless of what you think of those two players. I think both of them could fight it out for a number 6 corner spot, and I'd be totally fine with that. But you probably need a true number 4 and a true number 5 before you get there. They have not addressed that in any real way. It's not to say they can't, not to say they won't. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they will, but there's probably some level of disappointment that they have not been able to already. The second thing is pass rush. I am sure whether it had been a defensive tackle or defensive end, they probably would have liked to have added a pass rusher to this team. And I'm sure there's a chance that they still will, but they have not been able to do that as of yet. I am sure there is probably some level of disappointment. I do think that fans and maybe even, analysts, reporters probably feel that that is a much bigger need than what they feel in the organization. They're clearly putting a lot on DeMarcus Covington for him as the new defensive line coach to turn that defensive line around. But I bet you that there are many in that organization that wishes they could have addressed it in a larger way. They did not do that. They were not able to do that. They have not found a replacement for TJ Slayton, and there are certainly question marks on defense. I will say that Jeff Hafley answered a lot of questions last year, and he basically took this defense as constructed into a top 10 defense in any metric that you want to look at with them. They were a top 10 defense. And in the meantime, took arguably their weakest player in Eric Stokes and turned that into Nate Hobbs, what I think will be a slightly above average player. That's still a huge difference. The TJ Slayton thing is concerning. They need some bulk in the middle of that defensive line, and they are running out of options very fast. There's nobody left in free agency, really. And we're running out of options and ideas in the draft. Not exactly sure what they're going to do there. That is a big question mark. And I understand where, if you're looking at this draft and saying, where's the defense? How did it go that wrong? But it didn't work out that way. It worked out that when they were on the clock in the first, second, and third rounds, that the offensive player was the best player available for them. And I get it. You might look at some of these guys the same way that I look at some of these guys. Trey Amos was there in the second round, that they could have taken a legitimate outside corner that could have come in and compete right away instead of taking an offensive lineman in round 2. That could have been a direction that they went in. There's a pass rusher that's still on the board in Braden Swinson that I really love, that they could have gone with in round 3 instead of a second wide receiver. They did not decide to go in that direction. I love the overarching philosophy of sticking to the board and taking who the best player available is. Your needs today may not be your needs tomorrow. Somebody that you're not expecting to step up might step up. Somebody that you're expecting to have a huge year might not have a huge year. And somebody that you're expecting to be a big part of your team might suffer an injury. You might have 2 or 3 players go down with an injury. You cannot predict what that looks like. And so many times, if you are looking at need and what you need to do, you end up missing on better players because you are so focused and tunnel visioned on getting those positions of need that you're missing out on some potential really good players at other spots because you're focused in on that. I'll say it one more time. I bet there is disappointment within the front office of just the fact that they weren't able to address defense in a larger way. It still gives me hope and faith that the fact that they weren't able to do what they wanted but felt convicted in the picks that they made in Savion Williams and in Anthony Belton that those were the best players on their board, despite it really, especially when you get to Savion Williams, not being in a position of need. Goody said after the fact that he did not expect to be up there on day 2 of the draft talking about selecting 2 wide receivers. This just went in a direction that he, again, was not expecting. He also said that there was no opportunities to trade down in rounds 2 or 3. I don't know if that means he didn't have the opportunity to move up in rounds 2 or 3 and maybe get somebody different or maybe change sort of the direction of how this draft could go. But they trusted their board, and now we sort of have to see how that works out. In some cases, when they've trusted the board, it's gone very well. In other cases, it's not gone very well. It's not to give a carte blanche, blank check, free pass, golden ticket to the draft is amazing. But I do feel great that they felt convicted in these players, regardless of them maybe being not their 1A positions of need. On the offensive side of the ball, what this does do is it gives them a lot of competition at wide receiver. How many times do we talk about on the wide receiver spot, giving you a basketball lineup, all different shapes and sizes, all different abilities, unique traits, etc. This gives them a totally different flavor of wide receiver in Savion Williams than they had on the roster. It's sort of a Jaden Reed gadgety player, but in a totally different body type, and one that Brian Gutekunst said he does not see as a Ty Montgomery or as a Cordero Patterson or as, one of those type of players, right? Laviska Shenault. He sees him as a true wide receiver that can do some other things for you. He sees him as a true legitimate wide receiver. He is a very different type than any other wide receiver that they have on the roster. The other one, of course, Matthew Golden now, that is another type that they really did not have. And no, he is not Jaden Reed. They are two very different wide receivers that bring very different skill sets to your team. They're both 5'11", and that's pretty much where the comparisons end. They both outcatch their size, for sure. They both play more physical at the catch point than a 5'11" receiver normally would. But again, that's pretty much where the comparisons end. You have Matthew Golden, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed. Now you've got Savion Williams, Christian Watson coming back at some point, Malik Heath, Bo Melton, Mecole Hardman. For those of you that are like, it's too many wide receivers. Malik Heath, you are not making any draft decisions based on Malik Heath. Malik Heath is a nice back of the roster player that's going to have to earn his way on. The same thing goes for Bo Melton. The same thing goes for Mecole Hardman. Mecole Hardman is on a prove it deal. You're going to have to make the team in training camp deal. As of right now, unless something happens with Doubs where there's a trade on Sunday, which, by the way, I don't think is impossible, but I think is fairly unlikely. If it is as is, Doubs, Reed, Wicks, Golden, and Savion are going to make this team. And that 6th spot will come down to, as is right now, Mecole Hardman. Then you've got, again, Bo Melton and Malik Heath. They're going to fight for that number 6 spot. And when whoever wins it, once Christian Watson comes back, that job, assuming everyone's healthy, will be under attack as well. And they all could end up being off the team. I don't mind having more options at wide receiver and great depth and competition. And by the way, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, challenge is on. Get ready. You want to keep getting 40, 50 snaps per game or those opportunities? You better make the most of them because these guys are coming for you. They are going to do everything in their power to make it a very competitive atmosphere, and every snap is going to be a battle at wide receiver. You want to talk about urgency? You are about to have a lot of urgency at wide receiver because if you want to play, everyone's going to be nipping at your heels for every snap that they can possibly get. Hell yeah, sign me up. And you've got now all different options. Let's just kind of wrap up wide receiver and then we'll get to offensive line really quick. At wide receiver, one of the things that I think Savion Williams brings to you, and I think what we're going to talk about on the offensive line and at wide receiver is you have to be cognizant of the changing NFL atmosphere at all times. What is one of the most prevalent plays in all of football right now? No, it's not the tush push, although you could make an argument for that as well. It is the check down. The check down is a king move right now that is all over the place. Everyone's trying to get those shots deep, establish the run. The run's getting shut down as much as possible. The deep shots are getting shot down. It's hard to get those intermediate throws in. And what ends up happening? You're going through your progression, everything shut down, check down, shut down, check down, shut down, check down. And it's check down after check down after check down. Savion Williams, somebody that you can line up in the backfield, line up at wide receiver, line up as a H-back. You can do so many different things with him. I get Goody says he's a wide receiver, but whether it's as a bubble screen, whether it's as a little check down, if you're lining him up in the backfield, whether it's so many different ways that you can just get the ball in his hands, end arounds, reverses. He is somebody that has the ability to run through tackles, run after the catch, and be somebody that if he does get a check down or he does get one of these intermediate or short throws, he has the ability to break a lot of tackles and take it the distance. He's a very unique type. Do I think he can win outside at some point as well with some refinement? Sure. He's a freaky athlete that can bring a lot to the table. But in the meantime, the number one thing you want for him is a very creative play caller, and Matt LaFleur is a very creative play caller. They are going to find some very fun uses for him, and I do think he has the ability to make an impact on this offense as a type that they just did not have. And when you start getting into these, sort of shorter intermediate throws where the players can do the heavy lifting, run after the catch, Josh Jacobs, Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, Savion Williams, you've got some guys that can do some damage after the catch. And that's exactly what you want to see. Matthew Golden as well. You've got some guys who can do some damage after the catch. That's exactly what you want. So you have to be cognizant of, again, the changing atmosphere in the NFL, and you better have guys that can get some easy passes and can make people miss and get some extra yardage. Savion Williams is absolutely that. Plus, you've upside as an outside wide receiver. Doesn't have great hands. Makes some of the most ridiculous catches you will see, and then drops the easy ones. It's got to work on that. We'll go through a full kind of scouting report for tomorrow's episode. But very interesting player, but a flavor that they didn't have. And then on the offensive line, I talked about the changing tides. We are getting to power football along the offensive line. The game ebbs and flows. We went through our phase of lots of passing and everyone's just going to spread everyone out and everyone's defensive ends are going to be 230 pounds and linebackers are going to be like safeties and safeties are going to be like corners. And, all of these guys are just going to be small and fast. So what does everyone do? They bulk up. The offenses are bulking up, and it is a power game right now. And we saw Green Bay evolve in real time with Josh Jacobs at running back. But you know what the problem was with that? They didn't have movers on the offensive line. They go and get Aaron Banks, a huge upgrade as a mover from Josh Myers. That's going to help that. And now they bring in Anthony Belton, who is going to be the single biggest mover that they have on this offensive line. You ask why the red zone offenses struggled. It's because they don't have movers on the offensive line. Sean Ryan can do it a bit. Elton Jenkins. And guess what? Sean Ryan, Elton Jenkins, Aaron Banks, you're building that interior of the offensive line with big people that can move people. And guess where Anthony Belton's probably going to play? Probably on the interior at guard. He's probably the 2026 replacement for Sean Ryan. And I would bet that even they get some opportunities to swap this upcoming season. Maybe there's a rotation there. Sean Ryan's going to leave next year in the offseason. He's going to get a contract for probably 12 to 15 million per year. And Anthony Belton's going to take over as your right guard. In the meantime, he gives you some much needed depth along the offensive line that was really only 6 deep. And now it goes 7 deep. At left tackle, you're going to get Rasheed Walker and Jordan Morgan competing this year. We heard after the press conference that Morgan is going to continue to compete at left tackle. And your likely lineup next year, when Rasheed Walker leaves and gets his Dan Moore free agent contract for $20 million, your 2026 starting lineup is probably Jordan Morgan, Aaron Banks, Elton Jenkins, Anthony Belton, and Zach Tom. That's probably your lineup. You're going to pay Tom a huge contract. Sean Ryan and Rasheed Walker are going to leave in free agency. And now you have your ideal replacements if they work out the way that they're supposed to. And in the meantime, you get your 7th offensive lineman that was pretty desperately needed because there's nobody left. And we saw how the Kadeem Telford, Travis Glover, Jacob Monk experience went in the playoffs last year. It didn't, and it went very poorly, and they didn't have the depth that they needed. Now they go 7 deep. That's going to be something that's valuable for this team this year. I understand the imbalance. I am not making the argument that, Belton is an ideal, maybe 2nd round pick. But what I will say is I had Belton as a 3rd round pick. Most people had Belton as a 3rd round pick. As Justice Mosqueda mentioned, he was at 18 team visits. He was one of the most popular top 30 visit guys over the draft process. Teams were starting to fall in love with this guy. Regardless of that, if you were a 3rd round prospect along the offensive line, you win in the 2nd round. If you were a early 2nd round guy, you win the 1st round. If you were a 1st round guy, you win in the top 10. Every one of these offensive linemen got moved up. And Belton was one of those. the value there, eye of the beholder. Value at Savion Williams, he was a third, fourth round guy. He was a third, fourth round guy for me. I had an early fourth, but anywhere late third, early fourth. Dane Brugler, third, fourth guy. NFL.com, Lance Zierlein, third, fourth round guy. That's what you're looking at. So lots to kind of go over. My gut reaction is maybe not the greatest values in the world, but some very talented players. And by the way, Belton, you want to talk about his biggest thing that I noticed on tape right away? I had it multiple times in my notes. I loved his demeanor. He plays through the whistle. He plays pissed off. You are going to love the way that he plays football from a physicality standpoint. I've talked about RAS needing a few more relative a-holes on the team rather than relative athletes. He's got great athleticism for his size, but he has got that a-hole to him. He is a finisher. He's a punisher. He's a mover. And you are going to like the way that he goes out and he got kicked out of a game for spitting on somebody. I'm not saying that's ideal, but that's the type of player that he is. He is a big, nasty, physical dude. And this team on offense, you could use a few big, nasty physical dudes. I do not hate that at all. A little rich in round 2, no question. Not going to debate it. But do I have any problem with the pick at 54? Not even a little bit. I love the nasty mentality that he's going to bring to this team, and probably your starting right guard in 2026 while providing great depth for the time being. Disappointed there's nobody on defense? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a bummer. I think, like I said, people in the organization are probably bummed too. Just worked out that way. You don't get to control your own destiny when it comes to the NFL draft. You've got to roll with the punches more than control your own destiny. They went with best player available. I like the 3 guys that they got. I think they all bring something different to the table than Green Bay had. Speed wide receiver on the outside, gadgety, big, tall, super toolsy receiver who can run after the catch, and a mauling, physical offensive lineman that can play either guard or tackle. 3 things that this team did not have. And as Mark Oldacres pointed out so eloquently in the chat, there is no excuse for this offense. They have every piece of everything that they want. Maybe, again, they don't have a 1A wide receiver. Okay. They've got every style of wide receiver you want. They've got a big blocking or a big tight end in Tucker Kraft that can do everything, a big wide receiver or receiving tight end in Luke Musgrave. I bet they add a blocking tight end at some point. They've got big guys on the line. They've got small guys on the line. They've got pass protectors. They got everything. They've got what was the highest paid quarterback in football and a super athletic dude backing him up as well that can run a bunch of unique run game stuff. You've got physical running backs. You've got your speed back / change of pace back in Marshawn Lloyd. You've got your do it all back in Chris Brooks. You've got a power runner in Emmanuel Wilson. There is nothing from a sort of tool in your toolbox sort of feel that you do not have on this offense. So there's no excuses. They have every piece that they should need to be very successful. Now it's time to go out, put together a top 8, top 5 offense with a play caller who's expected to be one of the better play designers and play callers in the league. And now this defense with Jeff Hafley in year 2, which was a top 10 everything. Can they keep that together in year 2 where they're together longer, where you got rid of your weakest link in Eric Stokes? We will see. I would say C+ for their efforts on day 2. I think it was a solid A on day 1, C+. And I think a lot of that, again, was maybe a little bit more how the board fell. But I like both of these players, I think, a little bit more than probably most people. Maybe C+ is even harsh. B- B- sounds a little bit more right. And I think, again, just because you weren't able to address defense at all, not anything even to do with the players. So not maybe the most exciting day in the history of Packers draft, but 2 players that I think do add something to this team that they don't have. I know it's supposed to be a quick gut reaction, but again, anytime you give me, I didn't even need notes. I got through so much already without even having notes in front of me. Lots I wanted to discuss on this, a very interesting day 2 of the draft. I'll be back tomorrow morning with a full recap of everything. I don't know if I even need to after I got into kind of everything, but we'll break down these players a little bit more. Of course, we'll get to the deep dives later next week on both of these players and everyone that's drafted by Green Bay. We'll preview day 3 in our episode tomorrow. I'm going to be going live for day 3 to start the draft, probably go at least through the 4th round, maybe part of the 5th as well, over on the YouTube channel. And then, of course, I'll be at Titletown Brewery from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Saturday to break everything down in person. If you're in town, come for the live Q&A. I look forward to seeing you guys there. Again, today's show is sponsored by Luiges. Shout out to Habish and Rotier as well. I will see you guys tomorrow morning. Shout out to our Hall of Fame and All-Pro members. Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wayne, John Wild, Brandon Paletta, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Peter Ritaka, Jay Zimmerman, B. Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gessford, Dylan Patscott, Bobby Santoro, SoCal Pack, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, Razul Douglas Time, Jake Koner, Carlo Delgado, Willie Winklestinkle, Jen Wright, Ian Hool, and Matt Geiger. See you guys soon, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.